Can you take me back to when you heard that she indeed pled guilty to these charges and what you were feeling?
Yeah, it was, well, even before that, when Ruby when she pled guilty, it kind of started this cascading experience of emotions that I wasn't really expecting to feel. I kind of assumed it would all be just a very positive, like, excitement. But there was a lot of anger that came up. There was a lot of anger towards maybe even envy that that it was finally taken seriously, not at the cost of, also excitement and joy for the children that were harmed. But there were a lot of just like conflicting emotions happening all at the same time. There was anger when I heard her attorney's statement to the press. It was just so enraging and so patronizing. What he said about her taking accountability and her just wanting those kids to focus on healing was just absolute garbage. It was such, no, without swearing, it was complete manipulation and just so patronizing. And I think it was a completely just a tactic to save face, and potentially, I don't know, with the parole board that's being formed for her, to try to just manipulate her way out of as much responsibility as possible. It was really darkly ironic. When I lived with her when I was 16, something that she would consistently accuse me of is sitting in church in the pews and making myself look sad to manipulate people into feeling sorry for me. And so she would have me, people would go to the bishop because they were worried about me, for very good reasons. And the bishop told Jodi who they were, and I would have to go to their homes and apologize to them for manipulating them into feeling sorry for me. And she would coach me what to say. We would sit outside their front, outside of their house, and she would tell me exactly what I was going to say. She would sit in with me when I would talk to them, and she would like course correct if I like didn't stick to the script. There was an immense amount of fear that somehow she was going to manipulate her way out of it, that she was going to somehow get out of being held accountable. So seeing that she was not going to, there was like a kind of a slow relaxation on my part. There was also some frustration or anger towards the idea that I think they had a lot more on her. Just the fact that Ruby was given a plea deal to testify against Jodi signified to me that they had a lot more evidence against Jodi that were outside of just these accusations. So there was some anger, or I'm not even sure what emotion I was feeling about that, but like, I would never want those kids to have to go through go through a trial or testifying. And there's that part of me that's like, what else did they have? What else could they have pegged her for? Or like, is 4 counts really, like, to me, that seems really like she got away with a lot. Even though 4 counts, if with maximum sentencing is still 60 years, which for her will probably be life. It just is like, how many other things would she have been tried for had they gone through the trial?
What would you think this looks like months from now? Have you thought about that?
Well, yeah, I did talk to the DA on the case, Eric Clark, and he said that in all likelihood she will receive maximum sentencing. I didn't. All I spoke to him was with Jodi, and that's obviously we don't know for sure. But Jodi did agree to receiving maximum sentencing. I think 60 years is very soft. Even if she receives maximum sentencing, the fact that aggravated child abuse is only a 2nd-degree felony is horrifying to me. And I really hope that the state of Utah, that legislation that has changed moving forward, that it will be bumped up to first-degree felony. Because someone like Jodi, where this is a pattern, that's the other part of like her lawyers coming out and saying that this is like, that she's taking accountability and she just hopes that these kids that you just focus on healing, is such a lie. Someone doesn't go from abusing and torturing children for 15 years to suddenly realizing how wrong they are and then shifting into just hoping that these children heal. That's a joke. That is absolutely a joke. And so 60 years to me is nothing compared to what she actually deserves.
Did you read some of the description behind the counts by chance?
I heard some. It's very triggering. I went on News Nation to give a statement, and they had read some of the various the specifics, and it was really, really disturbing and difficult to listen to. Some things close to mine and some things that were not, but the similarities and the outcome of experience, like I believed so strongly that I deserved everything that she had put me through, and that it was my fault this was happening, and that I should be grateful for her, that she was saving me. So the emotional coercion and brainwashing that has occurred, there's no way to really quantify the detrimental effects of that.
For people that have watched this unfold over the last few months and don't have the personal connection to it like you do, what do you want them to take away from all of this about society, about what needs to be reported, all of those things?
It's really tough because I don't want to say that I'm grateful that there were physical marks on these children, because that's horrifying. And society, the justice system, they are not as, it seems to be not as reactive to invisible abuse. And the fact that they had physical markings that abuse was happening seemed to be the thing that made people listen and made people to start taking this seriously. And so, one, I think listening to our guts. If we think that something is wrong, it's probably because there's something wrong. Building up your internal and self-trust. I think especially in cultures that are predominantly in high demand religion, I think that is something that especially women struggle with, is like relying and believing what we feel. So that would be like I think a benefit, because people, like with me personally, people saw and didn't do anything. And I don't know what people saw with these children, but the fact that this was on YouTube, maybe, obviously not the extreme parts, but there has been a lot of like pushback on this YouTube channel for a long time, as from what I understand. And people knew that something was wrong. But I don't think we understood exactly what it was. So then we start like questioning ourselves, and then maybe it's all in our head, or who am I to say anything? So we start like self-doubting or doubting ourselves. And the deep ramifications of spiritual and emotional abuse. These children it's an uphill battle. It's going to be an uphill battle for a long time. And thankfully, the vindication and validation that they are receiving through this public trial or public hearing, hopefully will be a positive for them, that they will be able to like kind of have a catalyst on their healing. But as from personal experience, and I was a teenager when it happened to me, so my brain was more developed than a 9-year-old. I'm still in therapy weekly for what happened to me. So I can't even imagine what these children will be having to face.
Have you had other people reach out to you with other stories, or thanking you for your courage, or speaking out? And have you had some meaningful conversations with people about this?
Yeah, it's been, honestly, it's been one of the most unexpected and I I don't even have really like labels or language to express what this has been like for me. But I've had thousands and thousands and thousands of messages via Instagram and emails and YouTube comments. And I was on Mormon Stories podcast, and that was kind of like the first interview that I did. And I had no understanding of what that was going to do, or what that was going to look like moving forward. I've had so many incredible conversations and have met a lot of people through tattooing. People have come in to get tattooed that have found me through Mormon Stories and through different channels. And it's been unbelievably healing and connective. And it's actually pushed me to start school, to start pursuing a degree in psychology, which has been really scary and really exciting. So hopefully I can turn this terrible experience of my life into something that potentially could help others that have experienced, maybe not the exact experience, but similar levels of emotional, spiritual trauma.
How do you see this playing out long term? This whole situation that involved Ruby and Jodi. Specifically, I know you're more connected to Jodi, but I know you're probably more connected to Ruby now than the first time we spoke, through learning more about her, right?
No, definitely. It's so from how I understand it, they are putting together a parole board that will get together and see Jodi every few years or so, to see if she deserves parole. And from what I remember from the DA, that can be as soon as 8 months from now to be the first one. And so for me, that means showing up to these parole hearings, and hopefully other victims that maybe didn't experience the same level of abuse from Jodi. But I know that there are hundreds and hundreds of families and couples and people that have experienced horrific wrongdoings at the hand of Jodi. And so I'm hoping that these people will show up and fight against any sort of parole that she may or may not receive. I'm also reaching out to lawyers personally. I don't think the statutes of limitations I think they're up for child abuse. But I believe emotional damages, it can be up to 10 years after your 21st birthday, which for me, that will be next month. So I'm trying to reach out to lawyers now and see if I have a case to pursue. So that's personally what it's going to look like for me. I'm hopeful that other people will come forward and more information comes out. It's really hard to say what will happen with Ruby. I know that Ruby came out and made a statement about how Jodi had systematically isolated her and had brainwashed her basically into these lies and these horrific choices. And it's been really interesting for me to kind of sit with that, because on one hand, and most importantly, she is 100% responsible for the choices that she engaged with. She's an adult, she is in charge of these children, and she has been in a position of power more so than most parents because of her public image. And she's been doing this for such a long time. And so to say that she's completely, that rids her of responsibility, I don't think is true at all. And at the same time, which feels contradictory, but I don't think it is, there is a part of me that can understand, at least to some degree, what that may have felt like. Because something that Jodi did with me, and I said these exact words when I don't know if it was in this interview or another, where Jodi is systematic about things. She systematically tears you down and exploits your weaknesses. That's something that she is very, very good at, is that she's able to pinpoint your weakness, exploit it without you realizing what she's doing. And so at first she comes in like any good narcissist, any good psychopath, with this message of, hope and potential. And because she's a therapist, she's a psychologist, she has a lot of truth. And so, that's what makes the lie so good, is that she uses some truth that, makes sense. And she's operating within a system, like within a culture and a system that she already understands, specifically Mormonism, which, is a culture that typically defers to authority and personal revelation, and Jodi very much exploits that. And so I could see her using those things to destabilize Ruby into getting, maybe I used the phrase in another interview today about, like, it feels like you are a frog slowly being boiled alive in water, that you don't even realize what's happening until it's already happened. And so I could see, like I said, I could see her exploiting that to the point where Ruby was much more open and trusting to those, horrible choices. Again, that does not rid her of responsibility. So it's really tough, because I think empathy and accountability have to go hand in hand. You can't be empathetic without that, because that just allows for, people doing whatever they want. But I do think that the element of empathy in this case humanizes Ruby, and humanizes, like, or puts in light what Jodi is actually capable of. And there are people like Jodi that exist in this world. She's not alone in this. The amount of cults and cult-like people that exploit others is I think, from what I understand, is growing, especially as in online communities, and as people are more and more isolated. So I guess that's the other aspects that I would hope that people take away from this, is the importance of community, and the importance of reaching out to the people that are around you. And if you find yourself being isolated, use the tools that you have and the resources that you have to connect to others. Like, your well-being, your mental health, and the ability to be exploited is kind of is.
So it sounds like you were willing to testify. It got to that point, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything else where we sit today that you'd like to say? Because I know you've spoken a lot about this, especially since we spoke last, which I'm glad you've spoken to people. I think it's been nice to see your story shared and the perspective shared. I think it's important. But is there anything else as we sit here today that you feel is important about this case, or where we are today, for people to get a better understanding of things and how you're feeling?
I mean, there's so many things that I hope that people can take away from this. I think one is, the less shocked we are, because this is a shocking story for a lot of people, but the thing that happens when we are shocked is that it removes us from the reality of what happened. And so I think the less shocked we are, and the more we humanize these experiences, the more that we can see maybe small parts of those things happening in our own lives. And so we can either, go into therapy, or reparent ourselves, or read, kind of prepare ourselves for how these things can play out in our own lives, maybe to significantly lesser degrees. But I think that was something that, when I would speak to people were just like, I cannot, they just couldn't understand how this could happen. And the more and more we sit in that space of, I just can't understand, the more we miss an opportunity to learn and grow from these experiences.